Order, it's 7 o'clock.
Okay. Is
Is
Chad
it
ready?
roll then?
Yeah, looks like Chad is ready to go.
We're good.
A thumbs up. Perfect. So got the meeting order at 7. So I'll do a roll call, flip it back over, and so we'll do the town first. So Terry is on.
Yep.
I'd mentioned Dr. Lonsdorf and Sue Lugenbuehl both have a conflict for tonight. Dr. Lonsdorf may be joining us in a bit. I see JR.
Here.
See Shannon.
Yep.
I see Connie.
Present.
And Kate, looks like you're holding the reins for the city of Verona tonight.
I am present.
Perfect. And I have not heard from Greg, but I did hear that Derek would not be joining us. So we do have a quorum.
Okay. Well, let's move on. Do we have any public comment?
I got no emails or notices from anyone.
Okay, so we'll go on to review and approval of the minutes from June 17th. Any comments or a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Is there a
I'll
second?
second.
All in favor? Signify by
Aye.
saying
Aye.
aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the minutes from June 17th are approved. Patrick, want to go into the chief's report?
Let me get it pulled up. So looks like that's streaming there from what I can see from the Fact TV feed. So there's the numbers for the month. Again, just a record number of calls last month. We can't, I mean, it's the nature of emergency services, right? We get called and we go. There's nothing that we've been able to put our finger on of why we're seeing what we're seeing. Significant jump in calls up in Fitchburg from last month, but there's still no, one thing popping out of what's going on. But so looking at that, just kind of, I was sharing this with the mayor in Fitchburg the other day when we were talking budget talks. Same thing with the city administrator in Verona. We're currently at a 13% increase for this year. Though we planned on 3,700 for the calls for the year. If this trend continues, we're probably going to hit about 3,900 calls this year. So they've been busy. We see Narcan responses, CAR 15 responses. We dropped a little bit just because we just haven't been out for the nature of the calls that we respond to. As I mentioned before, the city of Fitchburg jumped a little bit last month over the city of Verona. I think that one, I'm not positive, but I think that sway has actually been, there was a huge uptick in the city of Verona when we were dealing with COVID. That's primarily, to me, I think the population difference between the two municipalities. And now that it's summer, we have more activity up in Fitchburg. All of our fractile times are where we want them to be. So you can see we're up about a call and a half per day. So 10, almost 11 calls per day over the month. So that should be blunt and penetrating trauma. As far as our consortium training for this month, we have, there's 2 new physicians working up at UW. So as part of the consortium that we belong to, Dr. Spigner. So he actually did the training this month. He's actually a licensed paramedic as well, coming from the Southwest, but has spent a significant amount of time doing actually some field medicine as a paramedic and then involved as a medical director. And then we have a new fellow with Dr. Emily Fleming last year. So UW actually sponsors a emergency medical services fellowship. So once they are emergency physicians, once they are done with their schooling and residency and ER fellows, they actually do a 1 more year working with our consortium agencies, doing specifically focusing on the emergency medical services. So they get them into teach them a lot about the medical director role and protocol development and training of EMS providers. So Dr. Catherine Dar, who's from Detroit, she's actually been helping out. She actually did our training for us earlier this week with Dr. Mancera. We've actually been pretty busy at the Aligned Energy Center since we last met. So we were out at the fair for the weekend, and then we were actually there supporting the CrossFit games every day. So it has been a good experience for our crews. Little bit of a learning curve, new for us, lots of new people up at the Aligned Energy Center as far as kind of management staff there, but we kind of got a list that we can work on, partnering with the City of Madison for transports and fire responses. It was pretty good. So keeping us busy up there as well. The Alabama concert is next week, so we'll actually be sending a crew up there. That was a tough one to draw straws for, about who gets to go work at that. As you can see, the rest of that data is there. Nothing really jumping out of the ordinary, other than apparently last month between 11 and midnight, there was, I think, all of 2 calls. So that was the safe time to be out and about. Pretty big jump, as I mentioned, in July. Almost 70% of our calls came up in Fitchburg. Normally that runs right around just over 50 to 60%, not 70%. Calls for service, you can see that there. Again, the sick person and falls thing just flips back and forth. Station 2 is still predominantly the busiest station we have. There's our aging report. Everything is where it should be. Cash on hand, that's just normal stuff there. Nothing is jumping out. You'll see the decrease in the savings account. So we moved, as you'll see, at the assigned balances fund, we had $792. The reason it's off is because of some interest that occurs there and posts at the end of the month, but then automatically it's transferred at the first of the month. $792 we had left in that Epic bike grant that we've had for about 6 years from now. When we spooled up kind of an events team for the CrossFit Games in the Atlanta Energy Center, we got a lot more people trained up on our bike medic crew. So we actually have a different uniform that we use for that. It's actually it's a polo, but it's a very lightweight bike kind of specific polo, but it's a bright yellow, black plus bike helmet, so we can see them when they're out and about. They can see each other. So essentially, we took that remaining $792 we had in there, was able to buy uniforms, bike helmets. We had a couple things we had to update. We had a broken kickstand. We actually had one of the things bike. So essentially, we spent the rest of that money. So moved it out of the, and that's where the donations, that money, that's what sits in that savings account. So that's why you see that money coming out of the savings account. That was the assigned fund that was the balance of the bike medic program, or that bike medic grant from Epic. The WISC funds actually did good this month as far as the CD that we have out there for the $24,000 for contract negotiations for next year. I am going to reach back out to them. So that, I think it was either a 1 year or 2 year CD. It was actually the majority of the interest that came from that. So it was about $1,025 in interest that came from that CD versus the $5.58 a month we're getting from our investment. So I'm going to reach back out to our contact out at WISC and find out how we can move some of those funds around and get that significantly better return on our post-retirement healthcare fund that we're getting on our labor contract fund. Nothing else changed. Our ambulance is up, actually, if anyone's interested. It's actually up at auction. It went up on Sunday, the one we were selling, so it's actually down a Wisconsin surplus. When I checked yesterday, there was 4 bids sitting out there. It was way lower than our reserve was met, but kind of looking what has been sold out there, Wisconsin surplus for the last, probably the last quarter or so, we should actually be getting a significant amount more than what we have gotten in the past for our ambulances. I think I think I've shared it in the past. To me, this one's just a little bit of a one-off as far as being 10 years old and not having the mileage on it that all the rest of them actually currently have, just because of the growth we've had over the last 10 years and getting it out of a frontline ambulance much sooner than most of the rest of them are. So we should actually get a pretty good return on the sale of at least that one, and be able to put some money here in that CD for the purchase of the one that's in 2 years from now, which, talking with our sales rep, our new ambulance is in service. If anybody wants to, we're not meeting together, otherwise we'd have brought it up and showed it off for you. It is over at Station 2 if anybody's bored. To mask up again, maybe wait a couple weeks or 30 days. You can head over to Fitchburg Station number 2. So that ambulance is in service. So far, the only thing, and it's not even a complaint, is just the crews are responding that it's just weird because it shuts off after 5 minutes, and then the back kicks on, so it kind of does some cycling. So when they go inside a patient's house and they come back out and the ambulance is shut off. So it's kind of a weird learning curve for them, but actually shared yesterday with the mayor, and I'll share it with the city council when I do my presentation here in a few weeks up in Fitchburg. But some of the quick math, I've said we don't we don't sit at corners and idle like like the metropolitan areas do as far as fuel savings. So we may see a little bit of fuel savings. To me, this is as we look at the greenhouse or carbon emissions, roughly, so 46 runs out of that middle station, out of station number 2 in Fitchburg. So did the math, it runs an average of about 130 calls a month. Our average call is about 15 minutes long. So when it shuts off after 5 minutes, the average, it sits there idle for about 10 minutes. So doing a little bit of math there, that 13,000 minutes per month, essentially roughly it turns into about 22 hours a month we actually save on a vehicle not idling. So in the big picture, I think when you start looking at it like that, it's a pretty significant contribution to reducing a vehicle just sitting there and idling for almost an entire day over the course of a month. So that's where we're at. Those assigned funds, I shared we got a pretty good investment return on that CD for labor negotiations. No donations this month, and August must have been like, we don't want to hire anybody. It's the end of the summer, so there's no milestones there. And those calls for service are unchanged. As far as our current in-house receivables go, we're 58% through the year, through the end of June. That's where our run income is at. So we're at 54%. As I've explained to you, about 2 months, we're going to see this number be low. This is actually much lower, I should say much higher, much lower than we had thought we would be. So I don't know that we're going to have quite the we will have a deficit of what that forecasted, or I'm sorry, that approved budget was, but we're seeing this number be not quite as large as I originally thought it was going to be. We've deposited all of the funds for the second half of the year from our municipalities, so you'll see that 100% be there. As far as the rest of the expenditures, there's nothing out of the ordinary. Again, 58% of the year. I would expect to be at 50% or 57% of wages and salary. The overtime is over a little bit just because we've been dealing with some of the things we shared about covering with the licensure suspension and some issues like that were unanticipated. Otherwise, everything on here is right where it should be, with that kind of plus or minus 5% where we're sitting at over the course of the year. Those high numbers that you see there are ones that I have explained in previous months. If you have any questions, please feel free to let me know. But otherwise, overall expenditures, we're at 58.1% for the year, and we're at 58.1%. So spending within what I'm supposed to be spending at. Any questions on that in-house operating budget?
Hearing none. Okay, thank you. I'm assuming personnel finance did not meet, so let's move on to review and approval of accounts payable checks. Are there any comments? Any questions? If not, a motion to approve.
I make a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 And opposed? No opposed, so the accounts payable checks as submitted are approved. And do you have the GASB 54 revisions?
I do not. I failed to send that one out to you, so we'll catch up on that one next month.
Okay, so we'll skip that one. You want to review the equalized valuations?
Sure. So I will pull up. So the budget that you approved 2 months ago is unchanged. What is in there is kind of as we mentioned, the equalized value. Let me pull up the right sheet. So equalized value was reported as at least a preliminary number on August, came out the first week of August. So this is what it looked like, and this is how those final numbers are going to ultimately turn out. So the city of Verona, as I had mentioned, or that you were aware of, the Department of Administration, a Department of Revenue, gave them inaccurately assessed their manufacturing last year to the tune of about $100 million. So they were over $100 million last year. So they are under $100 million this year to make up for that deficit. In addition to bring them to where they should have been last year, that was $100 million. So essentially they're getting about it's not a $200 million credit, but it is resulting in with all of their growth. So this is, of course, as I had mentioned with my budget faux pas already, this was another huge contributing factor. So overall equalized value of the city of Verona actually went down 2%, just because of the mistake that was made last year. The town of Verona preliminary report was a 6% growth. And then I think slowly click it here. And then city of Fitchburg was not held back whatsoever by COVID last year and actually had an 11% growth. Yeah, so all of the things in addition to the mistakes that I made did this. So when I actually plug, this is our actual and approved and then the draft budget for 2022. So our operating budget that I asked for is 3.1 million, which is about $100,000 more than last year, which is about 3% of an increase. Estimating run income, right? I had previously predicted these numbers here, of which we now know were fairly inaccurate. This is more of an accurate number. So if we subtract what we would get from run income, this is what our operating cost end up being. So this is what the municipalities need to support us with. If I take and plug those equalized valuations in, all three municipalities total this, which turns this into the percentage of what they will need to contribute for what we ask for. If you're down here in the past, traditionally, this doesn't change more than a 0.1%. So previously it was 50%, 44%, and 4.9%. Because of the equalized value changes, ends up being 53% for Fitchburg, 41% for the city of Verona, and 5% for the town of Verona. So this is what it does. This actually should say 2022 municipal costs, not 2021. This is the ask from the municipalities for 2022. Plugging that in this sheet right here, this is what was paid in 2021. This is what I'm asking for in 2022 due to those two factors of me screwing up the anticipated run income and the screw up in equalized value. This is what the final numbers end up looking like for the city of Fitchburg for 214,000, the city of Verona for 93,000, and the town of Verona for 17,000. And then this ends up where that increase ends up being. I've done my budget presentations with, at least as far with the city administrator and finance director in the city of Verona. And then earlier this week, it was with the city administrator, the finance director, and the mayor in Fitchburg. And then Sarah out in the town of Verona is aware of this, as is Mark. So the next step for me would be to go in front of the councils and explain again what happened and where this huge increase is. Discussions, I know at least Misty up in Fitchburg said she has kind of dropped, cast the net or whatever it is out at the Common Council meeting up in Fitchburg with lots and lots of questions. Right, my opportunity will be go up there to explain what happened. I know the request is going to be how can we, what can we cut, and how do we or how do we alleviate this huge 30% was huge. Without the equalized value thing, it would have been roughly 18% for just my run income issue. Yay, Fitchburg had phenomenal growth. Unfortunately, that's what it did to the numbers here. As I've explained to you and presented to you back in June, there is nothing really to take out of here with the exception of tapping into that post-retirement healthcare fund, which all we're doing is pulling from a post-retirement healthcare fund, which we're just going to have to throw more money at, though it may be down the road, right? It's never a good idea to pull from a post-retirement healthcare fund. That's a liability that we have funded. And as you're aware of, tapping into that reserve over the last 3 years with the screw up, last I did with the earlier this week, tried to figure out what that reserve is. Most likely about at the end of the year, we'll be sitting at about a 6% reserve. So there's not even reserve funds to go pull at to try to bring this cost down. Sorry. If the municipalities ultimately come back, or it just doesn't even have to be all of them, it could just be one of them. If you remember from our intergovernmental agreement, it has to be a unanimous vote. So if one of the municipalities chooses not to approve this and says, go back and make this number smaller, we'll be coming back to the commission and we'll have the discussion of what to do. So, questions? Just want to let you know what those final numbers ended up looking like. Good news is we're spending within our budget limits, so this is not, I mean, we're not overspending anything. We're spending what we should have. What, unfortunately, this is where we would have been had I done this right over the course of 3 years. So this isn't a crazy anomaly. You know, this isn't. We should have. The municipality should have been paying more over the last 3 years. Unfortunately, we're just making up in this 3 years.
Yeah,
So it's
essentially,
not.
we just used our reserve to fund a deficit.
For the last 2 years to make it
Yeah.
up, unfortunately, in this 1 year. And then looking forward, short of unfortunately next year is going to be quirky as well, just because the city of Verona will become kind of sway back to what the normal of the city of Verona would be. They're not going to be this huge. Well, they probably will be a significant jump just because it was a significant decrease this year. So the playing field will become much more level next year. Traditionally it's been about a 3% increase. So we shouldn't see huge increases, right? It shouldn't see huge increases in this next year. This will now be that traditional 3% or whatever it is for the next few years. It is what it is. So any questions? If anybody has any other kind of insight onto the questions that I'm going to get grilled on in front of the city council, please let me know. I'm sure I know what they're going to be. And I guess the plan is to just explain it, what the two issues were and why this number is so big. I know everybody's looking for money everywhere. And there's, unless you see something I'm not seeing, I don't know where to cut. And it's people. So
Be difficult to cut to as the workload is going up significantly.
And that's it. I mean, you know, I hate to even throw that option out there. The solution to bring this number down is layoffs. It's reduction in service. So that, I mean, of course, I'm going to tell that that's not a good answer, but that is about the only place you're going to save it unless you start robbing from the post-retirement healthcare, which all you're doing is kicking the can 1 to 2 years down the road. And but you know, we hear it every year. The budget's not going to be any better in 2 years from now. You know, easy for me to say bite the bullet this year and watch those 3% increases over the next few years. But when I don't have, you know, I don't have to explain to 5 other departments. Oh, I hear from all the other departments, thank you for not letting me hire my people again this year because EMS took our money. But it was an oops. Anything else?
Okay, well, thank you. Now, should we go into the closed session then?
Sure. So let me pull this up because I think you have to read that.
Let's see.
Let me.
Okay, we need a motion to go into closed session pursuant to 19.85 1F to consider preliminary consideration of personnel problems and issues. So is there a motion to go into closed session?
Make a motion to go into closed session.
Second.
All in favor of going into closed session, signify by saying aye.
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 All are in favor, so we'll go into a closed session. Well, we're out of closed session and there's no action to take. So any other business anybody wants to bring up?
Nope.
Hearing none. Next meeting, September 16th at 7. And a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor of adjourning, signify by saying aye.
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 And we are adjourned. Have a good evening.
Everybody have a